student assistants and their pay, basing off of what a full-time graduate assistant at Eastern Michigan University would make. We receive a stipend every year of $7,770. So if you take that 1% out, that would be $77.70 a year. That equates, we receive a paycheck every 2 weeks of $457.06. So roughly that comes out to be $4.57 every 2 weeks that we would be paying the city of Ypsilanti. Now that does sound like little pocket change to most people, but for graduate students, especially like myself, that is the only income I have. So that may, whether or not decide if I'm going to go buy a gallon of milk when it comes time for shopping, is that $4.50. So just putting it in perspective. Also, the federal IRS does not tax graduate assistants and doctoral fellows. They came out with a stance that they make so little money that they don't tax them as long as they are enrolled full-time. So currently, what EMU does, and I know this for a fact because I just sent through a meeting about it this morning, is we notify payroll of who are graduate students and graduate assistants, and payroll puts in this little process that will not let the federal dollar tax increment be applied to graduate assistants. So I don't necessarily think that students should be affected by this tax, coming from the stance of a student. It's hard to stay on the fence about this issue when I know I don't necessarily have the complete support of the graduate students to speak out against this. But I know that if this is going to affect students, and this is going to affect if students whether or not want to pick Eastern as their institution of higher education, then I would say no to that. Because as we all know well, we have retention problems at this university, and we need to do everything we can to fix that. And if having a tax is going to decide whether or not a student is going to pick Eastern Michigan University as their institution of higher ed, then I say no. If it's not going to affect the students, right now I am either way on this. But whatever the city of Ypsilanti is going to do, when they are going to affect Eastern Michigan University, they better think about students first. Students are the reason why Eastern Michigan University is here. Whether or not that the town really likes the fact that Eastern Michigan University is in Ypsilanti, because of whether the press we bring is good or bad. You know, I like to think that the university and the city should have a good working relationship. And I think they do right now, hopefully. But I want to make sure whatever we do at this university, in this city, is putting all students, undergrad, graduate, doctoral students, first. And if we're not, then we are doing a disservice to this community. Thank you.
Next we have Paul Schreiber, who is the current mayor of the city of Ypsilanti.
Good evening again, I'm Paul Schreiber. I actually agree with the comments that were made as far as putting students first. I believe the city and city council put both residents and students first. And I think this income tax vote is really about what kind of a community we want and how we're going to pay for it. I understand that income tax may be a detriment to attracting students to EMU, but also the alternative we're looking at, which is dire cuts in the next 2 years. We're looking at laying off possibly 6 in the police department, 6 in the fire department, either eliminating bus service or maybe laying off a couple more police officers. This is real projections. This is what we're faced with. And this is why the majority of city council decided to put the income tax question on the ballot, because we believe that these are two very grave alternatives, neither of which are very appetizing, but this is reality. And we have to have a balanced budget one way or the other. The city of Ypsilanti over the past number of years has actually been very good at balancing the budget. But we've done that through cuts. We've cut administration from 30 down to 21. That's a 30% cut. We've cut the police department from 58 down to 51. That's a 12% cut. We've cut the bus service in half. We've been lucky, this is the contract in half, we've been lucky that the Ann Arbor Transportation Authority has taken up the slack for us and basically given us a gift of half the contract, something like $120,000. So I think I would like to just wrap up by saying that the city appreciates EMU. It's one of our shining jewels in our city, and it's why people want to move to our city, because it is a college town. College towns are attractive. We have another attractive college town just 7 miles down the road, and we want to be able to say that we have a community we can be proud of. And I think we're at a crossroads today where we have to decide whether an income tax, which is going to affect residents and non-residents. Everybody who works is going to be paying more. People that are fixed incomes are not, but I think really what we're talking about tonight are the people at EMU. There will be taxes raised if the income tax goes through, but we'll be able to keep our services until at least the year 2012. If we don't have more revenue, then the current projections say that we're going to be having to cut back further cuts, and I think these are cuts that would make even going to EMU less attractive. So I believe it is a trade-off. I don't think it's an emotional decision. I think it has to be a decision based upon what is best for our community, and I think it's best that the voters decide that. Thank you very much.
Our next panelist is Greg Jones, an undergrad student here at Eastern and also the student body president.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Mike. I just want to share a little bit of how I see this a student perspective and how this might affect students. And today I don't really want to take a stance on one issue or another. The Student Senate will be doing so next week, and I invite anybody to attend that meeting. It will be open to the public, and that will be held. Actually, right now we're having kind of a scheduling problem, so we're not entirely sure yet. That information should be up on our website pretty soon, so I invite you to check that out and come up. But basically, I see how this could affect students in both ways. I think that there's some wisdom in seeing how there could be positive benefits to it and how there can also be some things that take away from it. Obviously, the city of Ypsilanti needs money. I think everybody here can agree on that. We need a little bit more revenue in some way, or cuts need to be made in some creative process. And these, some of the cuts that could happen to service can really affect students. We have several thousand students who live within the city of Ypsilanti and live just off campus, and that the restriction on emergency services and the like are going to affect students in that way. But also in the same sense, the effect on students as far as the extra cost of having an income tax can also be an added burden. As it was mentioned before, it can hurt enrollment, and that can play into a decision. If you can look at going someplace western or central, and you see that if you go to those communities, you don't have to pay an income tax. But here at Ypsilanti, you will have to pay an income tax. That can obviously provide some sort of a deterrent to attend Eastern Michigan University. And right now, that's not the kind of thing that we need. We can't have something standing in our way to increase enrollment when we've seen declining enrollment over the past few years. This affects students across the board. According to the emish.edu website, we employ over 1,300 part-time employees, and that is, most of those are students. And we can kind of speak to that as that can end up being a detriment. Chris kind of pointed out how, while it might not necessarily be such a large sum of money at one given point, students don't exactly have much expendable income. I think you have the whole the stereotype of eating ramen noodles because there's not exactly money to buy any real food, and that unfortunately tends to hold up true more often than not. And so I think we just need to look at it from that perspective. This could be a serious burden on students. But on either way, I encourage everybody to come up and see what the Senate decides next week, and I'll support that decision 100%.
Next, we have Cheryl Farmer, who is